Once upon a time, in a faraway land wrapped in snow-capped mountains and golden meadows, there stood a splendid castle that glittered like a jewel under the sun. Within its tall walls lived a queen of rare beauty. But despite her crown, her silken gowns, and her palace full of riches, the queen's heart carried only one wish: to cradle a daughter of her own. One icy winter morning, as she sat by the frosted window stitching a piece of embroidery, her fingers slipped and the sharp needle pricked her skin. A single crimson drop fell onto the snow-white cloth, and she instinctively pressed it with soft cotton. Gazing at that spot of red against the pure white, her heart spoke aloud. "Oh, how I long for a child," she whispered. "A little girl with skin fair and soft as the winter snow, lips as red as cherries, eyes that sparkle brighter than jewels, and a heart overflowing with joy and kindness." And fate, kind for once, heard her words. Not long after, her wish was granted. The queen gave birth to a radiant baby girl. They named her Snow White, for her fair skin reminded them of the first snow of winter. Every day she stood before her enchanted mirror and demanded in her sharp, proud voice, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me truly, who is the fairest of them all?" And the obedient mirror would reply, "None but you, my queen. You're the fairest in the land." But her beauty was as cold as ice. Her arrival at the castle was like a dark cloud casting a shadow over the kingdom. Where the kind queen once spread warmth, the new queen spread selfishness and fear. Crops withered, people despaired, and even the animals seemed to sense the unrest. So the king, weighed down by responsibility and the troubles of his realm, left to seek solutions in distant lands. This gave the evil queen free rein to rule as she pleased. Meanwhile, little Snow White grew into a young woman of enchanting grace. Her voice was like a songbird's, her laughter like the ringing of silver bells. And one day, not far from the castle, a wandering prince bent to drink from a river. As the rippling water stilled, he caught the reflection of Snow White above the stream. He looked around, expecting to find her near, but found only fluttering birds perched on branches. That brief glimpse captured his heart. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a beautiful queen whose beauty was renowned throughout the land. But as the years passed, her beauty began to fade. And so she did the only thing she could to preserve her youth. She consulted the magic mirror on the wall. But this time the mirror hesitated before answering. "My queen, forgive me, but it is not you. Snow White has blossomed, and now she is the fairest of them all." At those words, fury coursed through the queen. Her face twisted with envy. She called upon her loyal huntsman, her voice cold as stone. "Take the girl into the woods," she ordered, "and bring me back her heart." Unaware of the dark command, Snow White followed innocently, believing the queen wished only for her to enjoy fresh air beyond the castle gates. The huntsman led her deep into the forest. His hands shook as he gripped his knife, but when he looked into her gentle eyes, full of kindness and innocence, he could not bring himself to harm her. "Run, child," he whispered urgently. "Go far and never return to the castle. The queen wishes you dead." Tears welled in Snow White's eyes. She stumbled into the trees as the huntsman turned back, leaving her alone under the growing shadows. Fear wrapped around her heart. The forest was dark, filled with whispering branches and rustling leaves. She sank beneath a tree, sobbing until at last exhaustion carried her into a restless sleep. Morning sunlight broke through the leaves, and Snow White awoke to the sound of cheerful chirping. Small woodland creatures surrounded her: rabbits, deer, and tiny birds. They recognized her gentle spirit and guided her deeper through the forest. Eventually, they led her to a curious little house, no bigger than a cottage. Its windows were crooked, its chimney short, and the inside was cluttered and messy. Though hesitant, Snow White stepped inside. Everything was small, tiny chairs, tiny cups, tiny beds, and all in complete disarray. With no other place to go, she set herself to cleaning. She swept, dusted, and scrubbed it until the little home shone. Then she cooked a simple meal with the small pots she found. Her stomach full, she grew tired and pushed 2 or 3 of the tiny beds together before drifting into peaceful sleep. That evening, the rightful owners of the house returned. They were 7 dwarfs, cheerful and hardworking miners who spent their days in the mountains. As they entered, they blinked in surprise. "Our home is spotless," exclaimed Jolly, "and it smells like supper," said Clumsy, who immediately spilled some soup as he reached for it. This story is going to be about Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. Once upon a time, deep within a dark and tangled forest, there lived 7 dwarfs. Now, these were not your ordinary dwarfs. No, sir, they were as different as the stars in the sky. There was Jolly, who loved nothing more than singing and dancing. Then there was Angry, who, well, as his name suggested, got angry pretty easily. Next was Clumsy, who tripped over his own feet more often than anyone cared to remember. Then came Slumpy, who was always slumped over somewhere. Next was Red, who wore a red cap. He was the color of sunshine. After him was Ace, the wisest of them all. And finally, there was Lazy, who, well, as his name suggested, was lazy. One day, as the dwarfs were mining for jewels in the heart of the mountain, Ace suddenly stopped. "There's something strange here," he muttered. Lazy yawned. "Well, whoever it is, let me sleep and I'll figure it out later." And so they all went back to work. A few moments later, quietly, they crept upstairs, and there they saw her. A girl so beautiful she seemed to glow, lying across their tiny beds. Snow White startled awake, frightened by their curious faces. "My name is Snow White," she said timidly. "Forgive me for intruding. I meant no harm. I had nowhere to go." The dwarf's suspicion melted away. Ace smiled kindly. "If you meant harm, why would you clean our house and cook for us? You have a good heart." He introduced them all, Jolly, Angry, Clumsy, Slumpy, Red, Ace, and at last Lazy, who was half asleep already. Snow White laughed softly. For the first time in days, she felt safe. She told them her story, and the dwarfs grew sorrowful and protective. "Stay with us," they urged. "We will look after you." Grateful, Snow White agreed. And so began a new chapter in the lives of both Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. Their days were filled with warmth and laughter. She sang while they mined, and in return they brought her gifts from the mountains. Their home became a place of joy. But peace never lasts long when envy festers. In her castle, the queen once more consulted her mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror's reply was the same as before. "Snow White is the fairest, my queen." Shock struck the queen like lightning. She realized the huntsman had betrayed her. Furious, she vowed to finish the deed herself. That very morning in the dwarf's cottage, Snow White kissed each dwarf on the cheek as they left for the mines. Ace reminded her firmly, "Remember our rule. Do not open the door for strangers when we are away." Snow White nodded. "All right, Ace, don't be late." But soon after, there came a knock. "Who is it?" she asked. Through the peephole, she saw an old woman, hunched and frail. "My dear child," the woman croaked, "I am but a poor traveler. Might you spare a bowl of soup?" Believing her harmless, Snow White opened the door. She welcomed the old woman, serving her warm soup. "You are so kind," the woman said. "I have nothing to give in return except this." She pulled out a red apple, shining like a ruby. "One bite, and you will taste pure heaven." Snow White, unsuspecting, accepted it. She bit into the fruit and instantly collapsed to the floor. The old woman smirked, her disguise fading. It was the queen herself, and the apple was soaked with poison. When the dwarfs returned, they found Snow White lifeless on the ground. Ace examined the apple. "This is her doing, the queen's," he muttered. Though grief-stricken, they could not bear to bury her. They placed her gently into a glass coffin decorated with precious gems and set it on a hilltop where all the creatures of the forest could watch over her. One day, the prince wandered into the forest and found the coffin. His heart stopped. Before him lay the very girl whose reflection had once enchanted him. Tears welled in his eyes as he lifted the glass lid and pressed his lips gently to hers. At that moment, magic stronger than envy and darker than poison was broken. Snow White's eyes fluttered open. She breathed once more. Love had shattered the queen's curse. News reached the king, who, upon hearing the truth, smashed the wicked mirror and banished the queen forever. Snow White returned to the castle, her father weeping with joy to see her again. Not long after, she and the prince were wed in a magnificent celebration, where the 7 dwarfs danced merrily and the forest animals gathered to sing. Together, the king, Snow White, the prince, and her 7 loyal friends lived in peace, joy, and harmony. And so the tale of Snow White reminds us that envy cannot conquer love, and kindness will always find its way back to light. They all lived happily ever after.